2024 SEC preview. I'm Brandon Shanahan here on the Cornhusker Connection Network. If this is your first time on the channel, we got lots of great stuff here, so you might want to stick around, hit subscribe, hit the like button, and if nothing else, here's the secret. If you hit the like button, it doesn't hurt anybody. It helps us. It grows the economy, all that. But if this is your first time here, we host three shows here: Cornhusker Connection, Go Big 12 or Go Home, and Sundays with the Sprinkles. So a lot of football content coming your way. And now that football season's about here, we're gonna be ramping up all over the place here. So first things that we're doing here is previewing the SEC, and this is my favorite thing to do. This is what I look forward to. I was doing this before I started recording it. I love exactly what I'm about to do here, and that's go through every single team week by week and predict their schedule. I love doing it this way because I feel like you get a good flow for how the season goes. I think the biggest example of that is last year. I don't know if people remember USC was the favorite to win the Pac-12. They were the favorite to get back to the playoff, and that's fine. But looking at their schedule and the way that it was structured, I mean, not even about the teams that they played, but just how it was structured. They had 9 straight weeks of football because they had a bye, I think week 2 or 3, like most teams do. But then they didn't have their second bye until after the regular season was over, which is insane. That's a horrible way to build a schedule. And I thought they might be the best team in the Pac-12, but they're not going to survive the schedule. They're not going to make the Pac-12 championship, and they didn't. Now, I also don't think they ended up being the best team in the Pac-12. That conference was loaded last year, but schedule didn't do them any favors. So that's why I like to do this week by week flow. So what we'll do here is I'll kind of go one by one on each of the SEC teams, and we'll go over, I don't know, what I think, who they lost, kind of what's exciting about them, what I learned about them. Because that's the other thing about doing this preview series is that it just kind of forces me to learn about these teams. That I'm a Nebraska fan. I love the Big 12. I love Iowa State. I there's no reason for me to know in depth stuff about Virginia and Boston College. So that's why I do this, or even about the SEC, like Tennessee and Auburn. Like, why would I know anything about them? But this is why. This is why. So it holds me accountable, and it gets to see. At the end of the year, we get to look back and kind of go over what we got right, what we got wrong. So we'll get started here. Like I said, we'll go team by team, all was that 16 teams in the SEC, and kind of go over what I think about them, what I learned about them, and just kind of a general preview. And then we're going to go week by week. So week one, we're going to pick all the games for the SEC teams in the week one, and then week two, and then week three, and then week four, all the way through. And then we have our schedule. And then at a later juncture, we'll do a video kind of combining them all, see how we think the playoffs, conference championships are going to come up, as well as plenty of other content. So if you like any of this, I mean, we're going to have plenty of it for you here. But so nowhere else better to start. And also, I'll do these in order by like the Vegas odds, how Vegas thinks these teams are going to finish. So these aren't how I think these teams are going to finish. We don't know that yet. We won't know that until the end of the video. So I'll start with the favorite, Georgia. Georgia's interesting because I look at them, and a lot of the things I look for is like, who do you bring back? Do you bring back your quarterback? Do you bring back your coordinators? Kind of who are some of your impact players? And Georgia, like on paper, they don't bring back a whole lot. They lose their top 2 rushers. They lose 3 of their top 4 pass catchers, including Brock Bowers. They do bring back Carson Beck, and then they bring back a ton of defense. But at this stage in the game with Georgia, I don't think any of that matters. Either Georgia, they're replacing NFL players with future NFL players. That's all that they're doing. So I'm not worried about them at all. What I do worry about with Georgia is their schedule. So they play at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, like 3 really tough teams in 3 really tough places to play. So I don't know. I thought at some point I might be bold and try to, because there's a world to me where Georgia doesn't make the SEC championship game because they go like 10-2, they lose 2 of those 3 games, and then they lose the tiebreaker to one of those 2 teams and miss out on the SEC championship, but then go and win the national championship. Because even a 3-loss Georgia team probably makes the playoff. And I mean, I still think they're one of the best teams in the country. I think like tier wise, it's like Ohio State and Georgia, and then there's a gap, and then there's everybody else. Um, but that's one thing that I think is so interesting about the SEC this year is I think it's been so dominant by Georgia and Alabama that it hasn't been that interesting. Like it really hasn't been that interesting. Like I love the Big 12. We have a whole show on this network that's specifically about the Big 12 because that's how much I love the Big 12 conference because it has all this parity and all these passionate fan bases. And the SEC just hasn't had that in a long time. But they do now. Now that Nick Saban's gone, there's a lot of question marks with Alabama. Then you bring in, other giants like Texas and Oklahoma to come in and kind of get thrown into that mix. So I think Georgia's by far the best team in the SEC, probably the best team in the country. But then after that is where it gets really interesting. So up next, we'll talk a little bit about Texas. Same kind of thing. Looking at, I mean, we'll get to see at how deep the pipeline is. Another thing that I like to do is kind of project. This year is going to be this team's ceiling. This year they lose a lot of players, so this is going to be the floor of what their program is under this coach. Last year, I thought Texas reached their ceiling. Like they brought back like 20 starters. They brought back their entire offensive line, their entire NFL type of wide receiving core, and they were awesome. And it showed. They went 12-2. They beat Alabama on the road, and then they went and were a few plays going a different way to playing for a national championship. They were awesome. So now this year we get to kind of see how deep that pipeline is. Like, are they gonna keep refilling? Like I just talked about Georgia, they lost a lot of talent. They lost a lot of NFL players, but they're gonna replenish them. Can Texas do that? This is gonna be the year that we find out. The wide receiver room is pretty decimated. They lose their top running backs again. They do still have some good continuity with their quarterback. I mean, when you have Quinn Ewers, you're not that immediately raises the floor, and I think that's huge. So we'll see how that goes. This feels crazy to say they're the only team from the college football playoff that is returning with their same coach. 'Cause, yeah, Washington, Kalen DeBoer, he's now at Alabama. Alabama was in the playoff. They had Nick Saban, he's not there. And then who else did we have? We had Michigan. Jim Harbaugh left too, so that's crazy. That's crazy. I don't think that's ever happened even a little bit. But crazy stuff there. Up next, we'll go to Bama. Replacing Nick Saban, of course, is going to be crazy. But they also lost a ton of production um, to the draft and the portal. I think we'll get to see Jalen Milroe's ceiling with Kalen DeBoer and this offense. The schedule doesn't do them any favors. They go to Madison for Wisconsin. I don't know who at the athletic director's office signed off on that. Um, let's see. They get a bye week and they get to host Georgia. They go to LSU. They go to Oklahoma. So they go to Tennessee. So like every game on their schedule that's tough, they're on the road. So that's gonna be tough. I mean, just kind of projecting. I feel like that's gonna keep them out of the SEC title race. And that's gonna be really interesting to see. Is like how do Alabama fans react? How do they settle with not being like 1A, 1B in the SEC? Because that schedule doesn't do them any favors. Or like I could be totally wrong. And if they still make the conference championship with that schedule, I mean, then we're on for another 40 years of this Alabama nonsense. And then that brings us to the Lane Kiffin train. And Lane Kiffin, I really thought was going to be the next guy at Alabama. Once, because I kind of felt like that's what he's been kind of working towards. I mean, he spent all that time with Nick Saban as his offensive coordinator. He went to one of the Florida schools. I think he went to Florida Atlantic, and then out at Ole Miss. It doesn't really feel like you can achieve like the pinnacle of college football success at Ole Miss. So I was waiting for that Alabama job to open up, and it did, surprisingly enough. And it didn't seem like he was in the running. I heard the names of like Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian, but didn't really hear Lane Kiffin, which I thought would have been a good fit, a good fit for sure. But he's staying at Ole Miss, and everything I say about can Ole Miss really reach that pinnacle. This is going to be the year that we find out. Watch out, dude! I love Ole Miss. Bring back 20 starters back. They had their first 10-win season in school history last year. Their offensive line comes in with a combined 222 starts. Um, the I think the only top non-top five team to beat Penn State since 2021 One thing I don't tolerate is Penn State slander, and Ole Miss came in and kind of beat the brakes off. So when I talk about teams that are gonna, reach their ceiling or reach their floor, if they're, set for a down year, this is absolutely a ceiling year for Ole Miss. They should make the playoff. I think that they'll be a contender to get into the ACC championship game. Their schedule not nearly as brutal as it's been the last couple of years. They have kind of their tougher games at home. Um, they go to LSU, but they host Kentucky, they host Oklahoma, they host Georgia, they go to the Swamp in late November, and then Mississippi State at home as well. Um, so let's see. I mean, a 10-2 season kind of feels like the floor. I think they're going to be better than LSU. So I mean, as long as they don't get absolutely hogwashed by Georgia, they should be in the SEC championship game, and I truly believe that. So I love what they're building there at in Oxford, and then that brings us to LSU. I mean, they're replacing half their starters on offense, so they're going to have their hands full there. A lot of new faces. For me, this kind of feels like Brian Kelly. This kind of feels like what are we doing? Like, are you going to elevate LSU to be a national championship contender like you left Notre Dame to do? Because like, this is what his third year, so you left Notre Dame to come play with the big boys. Are you going to be able to play with the big boys? You had a 10-win season last year, but you also had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. You also had a historically bad defense. Like, here's the thing: people laugh at Iowa for how bad their offense was. I'd argue LSU's defense was worse than Iowa's offense. They were horrible. They were so bad. I mean, let's just. I got their schedule pulled up here. Let's see here. So they gave up 500 yards to Wisconsin. Wisconsin had a bad offense. 500 yards to Wisconsin, 390 yards to Texas A&M, who barely made a bowl game, 361 yards to Georgia State, 492 yards to Florida, 507 yards to Alabama. They kept Army under 200 yards at 193. Whoop-de-doo. 293 yards to Auburn, 527 yards to Missouri, 706 yards to Ole Miss. This was a historically bad defense, and they lose a lot of their production from that team. Like I don't know, I I don't know what this team's waiting for. Um, but this year will tell us a lot. They're 0-3 in non-conference, um, non-bowl games since before COVID, which is a real weird weird place to be. So let me see here. How does that shape up? So yeah, the last 2 years they lost to Florida State. They got roadhouse by Florida State last year. And that's another thing that's concerning about coaching because I think there's a couple of like litmus tests that you can have for coaches. Like how do they do going into a bye week? How do they do at home? Like those are things that good coaches get right. How do you do making halftime adjustments? And LSU got their doors blown off 45 to 24, and I think they scored a late touchdown to really even make that closer than it was. So back-to-back losses to Florida State. They lost to UCLA in 2021, but I don't think that was Brian Kelly's doing. Um, I think COVID, they just played an all SEC schedule. But nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see what they do here. It looks like all signs are pointing towards Garrett Nussmeier uh, being their quarterback, who he was around last year, which is interesting. Threw 78 passes, so we'll see how he does as QB1. Next, that brings us to Missouri. Missouri, holy smokes, they popped off. What was that? A 10 and 11 and 2, 11 and 2. That's bonkers. That's crazy. So shout out Eli Drinkwitz. I do think that they'll kind of come back down to earth a little bit here. I mean, 11 wins is crazy, but so I think they overachieved a little bit last year. They had 4 net close wins. They had 4 net upsets, which is very similar to kind of put that in perspective to 2022 TCU. They also had those same kind of numbers where they were beating teams they probably shouldn't have beat. They won every game that they were supposed to, and then they were able to to come away with a lot of the close wins there. Now they won't fall off to 5-7 like TCU did. I think they bring back way too much to do so. I love Brady Cook. Um, Luther Burden is an absolute problem. I can't wait to see him. He's so fun to watch. Um, but and the way that their schedule shapes up, kind of like not TCU, Ole Miss a couple years ago, where they had that 7-0 start. They're like, oh, Ole Miss is humming, and then they ran into their to the meat of their schedule here because I mean Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vanderbilt, at Texas A&M's going to be tough. At Massachusetts, is crazy. Why do you agree to go to Massachusetts? Then you host Auburn before your date in Tuscaloosa on October 26th. So yeah, that's not crazy to say that they're 7-0 at that time. They're probably going to be favored in all 7 of those games. I mean, Texas A&M is probably the one where you get tripped up. You get Auburn off a bye, um, but nonetheless, I really like where Missouri is. I mean, they bring back so much production. I don't want to say this is going to be like a floor year for them, but I mean, when you bring back Brady Cook and Luther Burden, I feel like next year might be the floor year for Missouri. But I like what they're bringing in. Oklahoma. Here's the thing, real quick, about Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC. Texas didn't run the Big 12. Like, Texas has won 2 Big 12 championships since 2009. Like, they're not like Texas comes in and they're creating all this noise. They're talking about how they're going to be the biggest game on everybody's schedule. They're not even like the best program from the Big 12 that's joining the SEC this year. Oklahoma is. Oklahoma ran through the Big 12 year in, year out. They're a perennial playoff team. You know, you make the change from Lincoln Riley to Brett Venables, and you go 2-3 in year two. That's incredible. That's a good jump. And I really like where Oklahoma is. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to um, get to really see them at their best. Their schedule is brutal. They might be the best team in the country to not play a factor in their conference championship. They do bring back an experienced offensive line, 122 starts, but their defense is going to really have to feast early. They bring back an elite linebacker and DB room. And then it's a Jackson Arnold show. Like, is he going to pop off? Can Brett Venables develop a quarterback in the same way that some of his predecessors did? Um, we'll see, I guess. They bring in Seth Luttrell, who was the head coach at North Texas, uh, and was on the staff in 2023. Jeff Lebby, of course, going to Mississippi State to be their head football coach. So he comes in, and he's going to be in charge of developing Jackson Arnold, and that's going to really determine a lot of what they do. But like I said, the path back to 10 wins is tough. At LSU, you host Alabama, you go to Ole Miss, and then of course you play Texas. Um, and then Houston's a Power Five non-conference game. They shouldn't have an issue with that. Tulane can be a problem if you don't pay them enough mind. Brings us to Tennessee. Shout out to Tennessee, 35-0 win over Iowa in the bowl game. I mean, I hear get a lot of flack from Iowa fans. 0 points scored against ranked teams last year. I think they got outscored like 95-0. Insanity. Insane stuff. But nonetheless, fourth year under Josh Heupel. If that is how you pronounce his last name, he pronounces it wrong. That's such a dumb way to spell that name. But let's see here. So, they're replacing half their starters, so a lot of new faces. So now we'll kind of get to see this Heupel pipeline. Offensive line and wide receiver room is probably going to be closer to what they were in 2022 compared to what they were in 2023. Um, last year they dropped quite a bit of offensive production. Joe Milton didn't quite turn out, yeah, and I also want to throw that out there. Joe Milton coming in to replace Hendon Hooker is tough. Um, but Joe Milton handing the reins over to Nico I mean, we'll see. I mean, kind of same thing with Oklahoma. Like, if you can develop them, you got your superstar. He's a superstar. I mean, the way that he torched up Iowa last year. Let's see here, 383 yards of offense. He went 12 for 20, 150. Yeah, so I guess not a crazy numbers passing the football, but composed. Now he's got the full offseason as QB1. I mean, I'd certainly take Nico over Jackson Arnold. Another very very strong recruiting class. So Tennessee, I don't know if this will be certainly not a floor year because I mean you have your young budding superstar quarterback, but 9-4 I feel like would be a win. I feel like that would be a win for the Volunteers here. And that's Texas A&M, a wild card, no doubt about it. Mike Coco in his first year here, previous 2 years, the head coach at Duke, who did a fantastic job. He was awesome. I'm so surprised with Texas A&M getting it right. I think they got it right. I think they would have gotten it right with Mark Stoops. A lot of here's okay. So here's my thing about that hire is that there was a lot of smoke that Mark Stoops was the guy, and then Texas A&M fans lost their mind. They're like, no fucking way. That's a nightmare. First of all, Mark Stoops is a damn good football coach. I mean, he's got a statue in front of Kroger Field in Kentucky already, and if he doesn't, he will. Um, and what Texas A&M needed more than anything was a football coach. Yes, Jimbo Fisher, great at a press conference, great with recruits. You need a ball coach, and Mark Stoops was absolutely a ball coach. I think it seems like they balked. Maybe Mark Stoops thought, "Hey, these people are fucking crazy. Let me back off a little bit." And then Mike Coco came in. Mike Coco seems like the same kind of hire. Now, granted, at the end of the day, the right hire. He's a damn good ball coach. He's got ties to Texas A&M too, which I think helps. But overall, like they're the same. They're cut from the same cloth. So I don't know how you can absolutely despise Mark Stoops, who's just been doing what Mike Oko's done at Duke, but longer and in the SEC. So I don't know what the outrage there. Nonetheless, I think it's a win. They do bring back and bring in a lot of experience. Let's see here. Team went toe to toe with Bama, Ole Miss, Tennessee as underdogs last year, so they competed. I think better than what folks are going to give them credit for. Um, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm kind of surprised that they got rid of Jimbo Fisher. It seemed like that team was humming along here. But they bring back every rusher on their football team that had more than 1,000 or had more than 200 yards, who had more than 100 yards actually. Connor Wingman back, Weigman. So he had a lot of snaps. And Texas A&M, like as much flack as they get for underachieving, they have had horrible luck with quarterback health. And last year was not the exception. So I mean, if they can just have an upright quarterback to play 12 football games for them this regular season, they're going to be in better shape. I really like where they're going here. Well, that brings us to Florida. Boy, I don't know, man. I might be missing something on Florida because I don't think they're going to be very good. I don't think they're going to be very good. I'm not a huge believer in what they've done recruiting wise. Um, I don't I don't buy into Billy Napier. I think he's on a hot seat. I don't think that he's going to make it through this year. He might. Um, but people keep talking about the schedule, and the schedule is brutal. Um, but I don't think they would achieve much anyways. I mean, last year they won 5 games, beat a Tennessee team that they probably shouldn't have. And then you lose to Kentucky again. What is that? Three straight losses to Kentucky. I mean, you're not even a better football program than Kentucky. You barely beat South Carolina. Yeah, I mean, you beat up on Vanderbilt quite a bit, and then you roll through three of your not even roll through. They beat Charlotte 22-7. And lost to Utah, who had a pig farmer as a quarterback or something. Utah was having a quarterback competition as they were beating the brakes off of Florida. So I'm not a believer in Florida whatsoever. The schedule definitely doesn't do them any favors. I mean, non-conference they get an improved Miami team. I mean, if you're gonna make a bowl game, that's one that you gotta win. You play Sanford, that'll be a win. Texas A&M, who knows? Um, at Mississippi State should be a win. UCF, we'll see. I really like UCF. We'll talk about that in our Big 12 preview. We're doing this for every conference, so stick around. At Tennessee, I mean, that's the game that you shouldn't win, but Florida finds a way to do that sometimes. And Kentucky, I don't know, break that skid against the, the wild Wildcats. Georgia at Texas, LSU, Mississippi, and Florida State. So they're not going to win a game in November, and that's fine. I don't think that you need to necessarily win any of those games. But I mean, we'll go through the schedule here, but you got to win Miami. You got to beat Stanford. Guess you got to beat Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and then beat either. I mean, a bowl game is not out of question, but I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Is my point. I don't think that they're going to do it. South Carolina, 5-7 last year, fourth year under Shane Beamer. I mean, it's a Shane Beamer show now. We'll get to see what he's all about. Bring back 15 starters total, and they had a lot of bad injury luck last year. So again, if they can just keep dudes upright, they should have more success. They should be back to a bowl game. There seems to be a lot of excitement for Lamora Seller. Now that Spencer Rattler's gone, boy, what a down year for Spencer Rattler. What a down year for Spencer Rattler. That's disappointing. But defense should look a lot better as well. They're switching to a 4-2-5. Sorry, I can't read my handwriting sometimes. Switching to a 4-2-5, so that should help them out a little bit. They got a lot of good pass rushers. They're bringing back T.J. Sanders, who had 4.5 sacks. He's going to be a problem, so watch out for them. Their secondary is going to be better, put in a position to succeed. So South Carolina should be back to a bowl game. And that brings us back to Mark Stoops, his 12th year at Kentucky. That's pretty crazy. 12 years, 73-65. That's incredible. That's incredible. I don't know why. If you're Texas A&M, if you're not super stoked, but I think they're going to be very sneaky this year. They're going to be very sneaky this year. They're going to look a lot different. They bring in Bush Hardman as their offensive coordinator, so they're going to be a lot quicker tempo. So that should, and they're kind of trying to keep their quarterbacks from thinking much. They do lose their quarterback in their backfield, bell cow running back Ray Downs, who is their only receiver over 200 yards, or only running back over 200 yards. So we'll see kind of how they're able to cope with that. But let's see here. So they bring in Brock Vandagriff from Georgia, the backup QB2 there. I think that's a good move. I think when you bring in somebody with that kind of I don't know, you kind of bring a culture in with you when you come from a school like Georgia who's had that success. You see Stetson Bennett, you see you know Carson Beck. I mean, you see how those quarterbacks find ways to win and what that winning looks like. So I think it's a huge addition there. So I think they'll be better off. Sneaky, sneaky. Especially because they get the real tough games out of the way. They play Mississippi on the road, September 28th. They play Georgia week 3. So I mean, there's really not a runway. But if you can kind of survive that, you go into a bye week on the week of October 5th. Come back to play Vanderbilt at home. You go to Florida, and then you can kind of battle it out the rest of the year. After there's not a game, I wouldn't guarantee them losing to at Texas is going to be tough. At Tennessee is going to be tough. Um, but you should be able to compete. Bowl game for sure. Sneaky if they can find a way to win a game or two that they probably shouldn't. Auburn, same kind of deal as Kentucky, or as Florida. I'm not seeing it. I'm not exactly seeing it. I'm not seeing the vision. I didn't think they were very good last year. Let's see, who did they lose? They lost to New Mexico State by 3 touchdowns. That's pretty bad. But there's, I don't know, real no objective reason to think that they'll take a step back. They bring back a lot of production. Their top three rushers from a year ago. I mean, really, their wide receiver room is going to be the only one with more new faces. Um, they bring back Peyton Thorne, who I don't know had flashes. I guess you just kind of like when you have a serviceable quarterback and you get to bring him back. So I think that's a win for them. Defense is definitely trending up. They bring back 8 starters. And really, that should keep them in some of these games. I mean, I don't think they'll be giving up 31 points to New Mexico State in November. Moving forward, they had a good game against Ole Miss. Only lost to Georgia by a touchdown, covered that spread. So I guess if I'm squinting my eyes, if I'm really looking deep into it, I can see the vision for Auburn. I mean, this will be the year that I'm really paying attention to them. Like, are they trending up? Are they kind of hovering, like Jimbo did? Some of those early A&M teams, or do they take a step back and do I take my victory lap there? That brings us to Arkansas. This is probably one of the teams that I was most wrong on last season. Definitely the team I was most wrong about in the SEC. I had them going 8-4 last year. I really like their backfield with KJ Jefferson and Raheem Sanders. Neither of those guys really popped off in the way that I thought they would. KJ Jefferson was their leading rusher at over 700 rushing yards. Was fine as a quarterback, 2,100 yards, 2-to-1 touchdown to INT ratio, but just couldn't quite figure it out. And they really fell off it. Ended up going 4-8 with some real bad losses hung in there. Got blown out by Auburn, blown out by Mississippi. No, they didn't get blown out by Ole Miss. They only lost by a touchdown. And it was weird because they'd had these games where like they only lost to Alabama by a field goal. They only lost to Ole Miss by a touchdown. And then you go and you lose to Mississippi State, 3-7. You couldn't score more than 3 points. You get blown out by Missouri, blown out by Auburn, upset by BYU. They're not only lost to 3 by LSU, so you can see the margins there. They bring in new offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino, who you really hope kind of helps steadies the ship. Um, Injuries certainly didn't help their case last year. They bring in Taylon Green from Boise State, so you got to hope that raises the floor a little bit. Um, but with the way that Bobby Petrino wants to run the offense, but this is the last dance for Pittman. I mean, he's got probably one of the hottest seats in college football. Him and Dave Aranda, I would say. But the defense should be better as well, and you kind of hope that they keep you into games. They bring back 8 starters. Um, there. So Arkansas is probably the number one SEC team I was most wrong about. The number one SEC team I was most right about by far was Mississippi State, and they were also the team that I got the most flack for on Twitter because I tweet out all of my predictions like week by week, and boy, I got flamed because I said that Mississippi State wasn't going to win an SEC game, and that's it, and that felt harsh at the time because I don't think this. When you think of teams that don't win a conference game, you think of like real bottom of the barrel. Some of those really bad Kansas teams and Vanderbilts, not Mississippi State. But I went over it time and time again. You can even go back. Like I paused the video and was like, all right, we gotta go back here a little bit just to make sure that I'm not losing my mind here. Um, and I was like, I think I'm wrong. I think they're gonna probably do better than what I say they're going to. But there's not a game on their schedule that I feel good about them winning, and I got flack for that. I mean, boy, I got my ball knowledge question. I thought I had them going 4-4. They went 5-7. We went 5-7, and if I wasn't as wrong about Arkansas, that was the only game I got wrong on their schedule. I went 11 for 12. Outstanding stuff. I guess you can also say Georgia. I went 12-0, 12 for 12 on. I mean, that's not as easy, but yeah, I was like, I don't think that there's a game here that I feel good about, and it was kind of that side of the coin where like the teams that I thought that they could go and compete with, they were on the road, and then they had really good teams come in. So they had teams like Kentucky and Alabama on their schedule, and LSU who came to Starksville. So I'm like, well, they're not going to beat LSU or Alabama or Kentucky. And then you have I I I thought that they could beat Auburn, but they go to Auburn. I thought they could probably beat Texas A&M on a neutral field, but they got to go to College Station. South Carolina is going to be a tough one, and then I had them losing at Arkansas. They ended up pulling that game off, and it's just a thriller 7-3 game. But enough about last year. Enough about me. Kind of flexing. They bring in Jeff Lebby from Oklahoma. I really like Jeff Lebby. I think that's a good hire. Still hope he keeps Art Briles away from his program. I don't think that I'll get that wish, but nonetheless, they bring in Blake Shapen, so there should be a much faster and a much more prettier offense. Like, I don't think they're gonna win Game 7-3 next year, but it's nice to know that if you have that in your bag, they definitely want to have that in their bag. I think their defense is gonna, like as much as their offense takes a step forward, I think their defense takes an equal step back. But that's okay. It's rebuilding year for Jeff Lebby. Um, I'm still excited about the hire. I think it'll work out pretty well. But we'll see how the cookie shapes up, and then yeah, last team here we got the Vanderbilt Commodores, and this is exactly why I do this week by week preview like I do, because last year I was like, I like Vanderbilt. I like who they're bringing back. I love AJ Swan. I love Will Shepard. I think those are both very high end pieces. I think they could, sneak in, win a couple of games here. They could. They went 5-7 in 2022, and I like their returning quarterback. And then I went through the schedule. I'm like, yeah, they're not winning an SEC game, and they didn't. I think they had them beating Wake Forest, New and LV. So I went 10 for 12, but yeah, and there's really not much to be excited about. I don't know why I shut my notebook. I'm not done talking about Vanderbilt here, but I so here's another thing that it's attributing to Colorado's success is that they were real tough on academics, and just the way that it was structured, that you couldn't transfer in to like a gen studies program, which is what a lot of transfers do, so you can transfer over your credits more effectively depending on, so it's not as dependent on having like academic programs. Um, and Colorado didn't change that until Coach Prime got there. Then so they were just hemorrhaging talent. They were just hemorrhaging transfers, just going out. And they couldn't really bring anybody in. And now we're seeing that with Stanford. We're seeing that with Vanderbilt, where like they have these pristine academic standards that they're not willing to bend at all, and they're not willing to restructure like Colorado did. And we're seeing guys like AJ Swan and Will Shepard leave. Uh, Ironically enough, we're seeing Will Shepard leave to Colorado. So it's really hard to drum up any optimism for Vanderbilt. Overall, I'd probably say their offense gets a slight bump in production, just because it's hard to imagine them doing much worse than they did. But we'll see. We'll see. All right, but now it's the fun stuff. Now let's start picking some games. Like I said, I go week by week, and that's for a very specific reason. It's so you can really catch a feel for how the season flows in practice. Because I feel like it's one thing to like look at a team's schedule and be like, oh well, here's their schedule, and I think they're gonna win this game and this game and this game. This one's gonna be tough. You don't really get the progression of that. So we go week by week here, and we'll start with week one. These are usually the easy ones. As they're typically playing a tougher, or not a tough, but like a softer non-conference schedule, as the SEC, as all conferences do. I don't. This is not the time to bag on the SEC here, but Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. I think they both win those games. Uh, Probably the more intriguing this there's a couple of intriguing games here. Georgia, I, I, I couldn't tell you. If I'm gonna talk you into Clemson, it's gonna be because this game's gonna mean more to them. Uh, but it's in Atlanta. I got nothing really. Georgia's gonna win that game by a million. Virginia Tech, I think, is gonna give the SEC their first loss. I really like Virginia Tech independently of Vanderbilt, and I also don't feel good about Vanderbilt, so that one's a pretty easy one. I like Tennessee over Chattanooga. Then, if I'm gonna sell you into Florida here, I'm gonna sell it to you because their quarterback's more experienced. They bring back Graham Mertz, where there could be some growing pains with Cam Ward. Um, I've been burned by believing in Miami each of the last two seasons. But I'm also pretty firm in my belief that Florida is not going to be as good as anybody says that they are. I think Texas rolls on Colorado State. Let's see here. South Carolina rolls up on them. Watch out, Mississippi State for Eastern Kentucky. This feels like a dumb game to lose, but I think they win, just like Alabama and Ole Miss win over Western Kentucky and Furman. And now another intriguing game. Saturday night, college game day is going to be there. Texas A&M and Notre Dame. I really like I guess one thing that kind of falls through the cracks is Notre Dame is not in a conference. Um, they kind of slipped through the cracks in this preview, so I'm not as educated about Notre Dame as I am Texas A&M. I think I'll give the Irish the bump. Going into College Station is going to be crazy though, but I mean they competed very well with Ohio State last year. Um, yeah, and then give me Auburn and Kentucky over their non-conference foes, Alabama, A&M, and Southern Mississippi. And this was interesting. Like I said, LSU hasn't beaten a non-conference, non-bowl team since before COVID, since Brian Kelly got there. Um, and they play USC. Miller Moss is going to be a problem. I don't think people are talking about that enough. But what is this, a Sunday night game? I love this shit, dude. I love this first weekend in college football where you get games on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I think even Monday. I love this shit. Um, give me Musmeyer versus Miller Moss. I really like Miller Moss there. It's tricky because I don't really trust any of these coaches. In Allegiant Stadium, LSU's traveling two time zones. Give me USC. Give me USC here. Moving on to week two, couple of real high key games. I mean, I think everyone's going to be talking about Texas, Michigan being like the big one, and probably rightly so. But I think this Oklahoma State Arkansas game is going to be very significant for what both teams are trying to accomplish here. Um, boy, I was put in so much faith in Sam Pittman and Arkansas last year, and it didn't work out. I really like Oklahoma State, so I think they'll pick up the win. Um, and now as we get to this actually we'll circle back to this Texas Michigan games because I think Texas A&M is gonna roll. Georgia, Auburn, I think they're all gonna roll. Um, South Carolina, Kentucky, our first conference game of the season. Bum, bum, bum. Let me also add a just so I can keep track of conference wins. Um, let's see here. South Carolina and Kentucky. I'm just gonna give the edge to Kentucky because they're at home. I really feel like this is a coin flip game. Ole Miss, Alabama, Florida, Missouri. I think they're all gonna get big wins here. NC State, boy, I think I like NC State quite a bit here. Let me actually see what notes I have on NC State. NC State, hard to find success with three different quarterbacks. Bum, bum. Got Grayson McCall at quarterback. I feel like week 2 it's going to be a little bit tough for him to get involved. So yeah, he gave me Tennessee, LSU, and Vanderbilt picks up their first win. Houston and Oklahoma. As much as I'd love for this to be a good game, give me Oklahoma by 10, especially in Norman, Mississippi State, and Arizona State's. Ooh, give me Arizona State picking up the win. I really love what Kenny Dillingham's doing. So I think he's in a little bit better of shape than Levy is week 2. Although if they win this game, then a lot of the notions I have throughout the season are kind of toast. So we'll see how. I was about to start calculating. Move on to the next week. We haven't talked about Texas, Michigan. Um, I really so and like you'll hear more of this like the Big Ten video. I think Michigan's gonna kind of stink. As let's recap, they're missing their head coach, QB1, running back run, 3 of their top 4 wide receivers, almost their entire offensive line. And unlike Georgia and Alabama, they haven't recruited at a very elite level to where you can kind of look at it and go, like, oh, well, they're just replacing NFL players with future NFL players. That's not quite the case with Michigan. So I don't think that this is going to be. If I'm going to talk myself into Michigan, it's going to be because it's at the big house, really hard to win on the road. But Texas doesn't seem to have that problem. They went into Tuscaloosa last year and beat up on Alabama, won by double digits. So I think that this is. I think this I don't think this Texas team is as good as last year's Texas team, but I do think last year's Alabama team was way better than this Michigan team. So I think Texas gets the big win there. All right, week 3, Alabama, Wisconsin. Like I said, this one's going to be tough on the road. So this would be kind of the first big upset I could pull. Man, this would be. We're going to circle back to this one because I think this is an early season defining game for Wisconsin. Because I think I'm also going to do something where it's like needle movers. Like if you win this game, it means the world. If you lose this game, boy, you feel bad about it. Like I think of like Nebraska tying it in there with the Colorado game. If you win that Colorado game, that's a huge flood of confidence. You, this you finally start putting wins together, teach this team how to win on bigger stages. But if they lose, then it's such a kick in the stomach. I don't think that this is quite that, but this would move the needle so much for Wisconsin to get a win. So we'll circle back. But 11 a.m. game, big noon game on Fox. That'll be tough. That'll be tough. Watch out, Alabama. LSU and South Carolina. Um, boy, I don't feel great about either of these teams. Give me LSU. Give me LSU here. Don't feel that confident about it on the road, but LSU, especially with their running game, should be able to get that taken care of. Missouri should have a pretty easy game against Boston College. Now, Mike Elko versus Billy Napier. Now, this is a big needle game for Florida because I think this is one of the games that you kind of look at and be like, this is kind of a 50-50 game, but should be a game that we win and probably a game that we need to win. Um, I like Graham Mertz. I'm gonna say Florida wins this one. I don't feel great about it, but I do. As far as like Group of 5 non-conference games goes, Tulane's probably well, I guess in the past has been as good as it gets. I don't think Arkansas is gonna have trouble with UAB. At least they should. Otherwise, this could be the game. This could be the first opportunity for Sam Pittman to actually get fired if they can't win that game. I'd love to see UTSA come up big against Texas, but I don't think they do. Just because I don't know anything about Georgia State, I'm gonna give Vanderbilt the nod there. Georgia and Kentucky, boy, tough stuff for Kentucky. 2 conference games so early on. New Mexico and Auburn, I don't think that they're gonna fall again, especially Jordan Hare Stadium. Big opportunity for Mississippi State to pick up a win, and then Tennessee against Kent State. Now circling back to Alabama, Wisconsin. Well, let's break it down. Head coaches. I think I like Kalen DeBoer more than I like Luke Fickle, but a first year Kalen DeBoer is tough. I mean, I guess you get the 2 game runway to figure out how to mesh. I think that'll probably be enough. I like this Wisconsin team though. At home, 11 a.m. kickoff. Alabama's traveling to the Central Time Zone. First road game of the year. I'm curious what the point spread on this game will be. But let me see if I can find some more information on this game. Because I think Wisconsin's running game is going to be a lot better than it was last year. And just hope, I think they kind of missed with their transfer quarterback here. So let's see here. Bama has won 9 straight road openers, but they're 0-5 against the spread. So I think whatever the spread on this game is going to be, it's going to be closer than I think a lot of people will give credit for. Let me just take a peek at Wisconsin's preview here and see what notes I have for them. Let's see here. So, because I feel like they brought in a transfer quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke from Miami. He doesn't really move the needle much for me. He doesn't move the needle much. Yeah. I'm gonna go with Bama here. I'm gonna go with Bama. I think if it's double-digit point spreads, I'd probably like Wisconsin. But yeah, give me Bama. Week 3, starting to get into some more conference action, wrapping up the first half of the non-conference schedule. The SEC still does that really soft thing where they have that non-conference game in November, which is I think just so soft. I can't believe it. But Florida on the road to Mississippi State. Boy, this would be a good win for Jeff Lebby to get some confidence in. I don't think he does. Kentucky. This is one of those games on the schedule where if you're trying to get to a bowl game, this is one that you have to get. You have to make hay while the sun's out. So I think they pick up the win against Bowling Green. Same thing with Texas or against Ohio, Texas A&M over Bowling Green, Texas over UL Monroe, and then Arkansas and Auburn. Again, this is one that I think if you're Arkansas, you gotta steal. But I don't have any reason to think no. LSU's going to beat up on UCLA. I think UCLA is going to have a down year. Missouri over Vanderbilt. And now this one's going to be let me just jump ahead real quick and just mark down a win for South Carolina. Oklahoma at hosting Tennessee. Like we said with Oklahoma, they got a tough schedule. So like this is one that you gotta pick up. Um, SEC opener at home. I think there's going to be a lot of buzz. I love Tennessee. I love Nico, but that's a tough place to go into and play. You give me the Sooners to pick up the win there. Whoops. I mean the Sooners to pick up the win. All right, heading into week 5, standings starting to take some shape. And I'm gonna make some mistakes with these throughout the video. So if you see something, just now we're deep into SEC play here. Kentucky and Ole Miss. Give me Ole Miss. Oklahoma and Auburn. At Auburn. We'll come back to that one. Arkansas and Texas A&M. I think Arkansas picks up the win here. Whoops. I think they pick up the win here. I think Texas A&M has kind of gotten the bright side of the coin against Arkansas the last couple of years, especially now that it's in Arlington, Southwest Classic. Great game, by the way. Great game to be at. Texas picks up the win against Mississippi State, and then we'll just go ahead and jump ahead real quick. LSU and South Alabama. So a couple of real good games, Oklahoma and Auburn. Um, it's gonna be a tough spot for Jackson Arnold, and that's what I'm really worried about for Oklahoma. That this is gonna be kind of his first real test here, and then you're coming off of a big win against Tennessee the week before. Again, this is why I like to do this week by week because now we know that Oklahoma's coming in on a high. But I also just don't feel good about Auburn. So I think Oklahoma's probably pretty strongly a better team. But the freshman quarterback, I guess give me Auburn. Give me Auburn to win. I don't feel great about it. I think if it was at another point in the season or Norman, I think I give the nod to Oklahoma. But that first SEC game is going to come with a lot of weight. And I don't think Oklahoma can come with that energy 2 weeks in a row. So Auburn picks up their first win in conference play, second win against the SEC. This one's tough to read. Georgia and Alabama. I think Georgia's the better team. I think it's real tough to beat Alabama at home, even though Texas did last year. Um, so yeah, that's one of the toughest places to play. But I like Carson Beck. I think this Georgia team's gonna have a chip on their shoulder, especially after the SEC championship game. And I think they're gonna pull out the win. So yeah, Georgia over Bama. Moving on to Week 6, Missouri, Texas A&M, Alabama, Vanderbilt, UCF, Florida, Tennessee, Arkansas, Auburn, Georgia, Ole Miss, South Carolina. This one should be pretty quick. Oh boy, immediately we're hung up on Missouri versus A&M. I think I want to say that Missouri's the better team. But again, playing at Kyle Field's tough. You know what? Maybe I'm giving Kyle Field too much, too much leeway. Cause let's pull up some of their recent home losses. Cause I feel like it's not gonna be very kind. Cause EA Sports thought it's the number one home field advantage in America last year. They lost to Alabama at home. Oh, cause that was their only. Is that really their only home loss? They lost at Miami, lost to Alabama, lost at Tennessee, at Mississippi. Okay, I think I'm seeing the vision. 2022, they lost to Florida, lost to Ole Miss at home, lost to Appalachian State. That's a tough look. At home in 2021, they lost to Mississippi State at home, Arkansas at home. That was the good Arkansas team, by the way. And that was still Mike Leach, Mississippi State. You know what? Man, where's Missouri at record wise? They're 4-0. This feels like their first loss. This feels like a tough place to play. I think A&M starts to figure it out here. We're in October now. Alabama cruises through Vanderbilt. UCF at Florida. I really like UCF. I think are going to be much improved. I think going to Gainesville is going to be a tough look. Give me Florida. On a neutral field, I might take UCF, but I mean, if I'm also going to sell you on UCF, Arthur Gustavo Malzahn III is very accustomed to SEC stadiums. He's going to have his team ready. KJ Jefferson's their quarterback now, so he's accustomed to SEC stadiums. And I think when you have those two guys, I feel like you can go into Gainesville and pick up a win. Show that you are what you say you are. Let me get UCF with the upset here. Tennessee at Arkansas. Let's see here. I think I like Tennessee more, but Arkansas is a tough place to play. Tennessee's coming off of a bye as well after that tough loss to Oklahoma. I think that they find a way to figure it out. In Fayetteville, Auburn, and Georgia. Finally, some humbling for Auburn, and then Ole Miss over South Carolina. Feels pretty easy. So this feels like a good week. Lots of situations where I really value home field advantage. If you haven't noticed that yet, I really value home field advantage. But I mean, sometimes the better teams play on the road too, like Missouri, like Tennessee. So interesting week 6 now that we're into October. All right, so now we head into October 12th. Great week of college football here. Let's take a quick look at the standings. So Georgia's probably going to be number 1 or number 2 at this stage of the game, depending on how Ohio State does. Ole Miss coming in still undefeated. Are they still? They played 6 games. Yeah, they don't. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. They play their first 7 games, so they play Kentucky or they play LSU. Then they have a bye, 3 games against Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Georgia, and then another bye, then Florida, Mississippi State. That's a tough run to start off the season. I mean, they're not in conferences and anything. You get a 4 game preseason, and then you host Kentucky. You go to South Carolina. That's going to be an interesting game. So we'll get to that later. But they're still undefeated. They're 6-0. Texas is undefeated with a big win against Michigan. So they're in the top 5, top 3 probably. Um, so things starting to shape up. Alabama probably on the outside of that top 5 looking in with that one loss to Georgia. So let's get after it. I think Bama continues to win. They beat South Carolina at home. Red River rivalry in the Cotton Bowl. Oklahoma at Texas. We'll circle back to that one. Let's knock out a couple of the easy ones. Georgia over Mississippi State. Kentucky over Vanderbilt. Florida or Missouri over UMass. Then in Knoxville, Tennessee at Neyland Stadium, there's no way that Florida wins this game, right? They can't keep getting away with this. Eventually, the pendulum is going to come back to average, and Tennessee's going to find a way to win this game. So that's a big win for them. They're cruising along. They're 5-1 now. So back up the list here. I really like Ole Miss. I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the country, but that's a tough stretch, and you're really kind of getting into your to the meat of the schedule with Oklahoma and Georgia over the next month. Maybe you're looking at that bye. LSU's coming off a bye. Give me a win for LSU. Give me a huge win for LSU. That's huge. Where are they at? They're 5-1 now with the big win over 6-0 Ole Miss. That's huge. Let's see, Oklahoma and Texas. Jackson Arnold versus Quinn Ewers. I really don't like picking Texas in this spot. Um, but I think having Quinn Ewers versus freshman Jackson Arnold. Last time Oklahoma had a freshman was Spencer Rattler, who eventually got benched in that game. Um, Again, I mean, I guess he got benched for another freshman in Caleb Williams, so I don't know if that's exactly a fair thing to say. But yeah, dude, give me Texas, I guess. I don't like that at all. But they're humming. After that horrible game last year, I think they bounce back and they take care of business in Dallas. All right, mid October, October 19th now, week 8. Ball State and Vanderbilt. Feels like a good spot for Vanderbilt to pick up a win. LSU and Arkansas. Oh boy, are the Hogs ready to compete with them? LSU's coming off of a huge win against LSU. Let me take a look at the rest of Auburn's schedule because I want to get. I think I'll give them a game where they're probably not expected to win. That's probably one at home. LSU's sneaky. Arkansas is coming off a bye. It's homecoming. Because then they got at Mississippi State, Texas at home. Watch out for that game. Arkansas hates Texas. They'll get up for that game for sure. You know what? Give me the upset here. Give me the upset. Give me Arkansas over LSU, Kentucky, and Florida. This is absolutely one that Florida's got to get, and I don't think they're going to let it slip through their fingers. I think they're going to break the 3 game skid against Kentucky at home, especially because now Florida's 3-3 halfway through the season. You need to get to 3-3 to make the the bowl season, you're going to pick up a win. I guess you're not going to pick up an automatic win, not conference because you play Florida State, but got to make hay while the sun's out. This is one that they pick up. Texas A&M and Mississippi State. Give me. Let's see, where's Texas A&M at? 3-3. Mississippi State's 2-4. I don't think they've picked up a conference win yet. Who? Recent history would say that Texas A&M's having some quarterback injuries right about now. That feels like a shaky thing to base a prediction off of, but those are the facts in Starksville. That's not an easy place to play. Give me Mississippi State. Let's see, Auburn and Missouri. I like Missouri here. How's Missouri doing? Missouri, they got to be doing pretty good. 6-1 now. That's pretty impressive. South Carolina, Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's able to bounce back. Alabama and Tennessee, third Saturday in October. So last time Alabama went to Knoxville was that great Hendon Hooker game. By the way, a game where they didn't play any defense. Nobody talks about the SEC doesn't play defense anymore. I guess. I guess I like Tennessee. Nico versus Jalen Milroe. I mean, at this point, you got to imagine that they're humming. Tennessee's such a tough place to play. They're gonna want this game more than anything. They did just come off of that big win against Missouri or against Florida. Let me come back to that because I think Georgia Texas is probably gonna be Georgia's best or most opportunity to pick up a loss. Let me look at the rest of their schedule here. Because Texas is a tough place to play. Usually that's worth about 5 points. That's among the best. I think Georgia comes up with this one. I think Georgia comes up with this one. I think they're still pretty locked in. Give me Georgia to give Texas their first loss. Alabama and Tennessee. Let's see if I can find some more insight on this game because that's a tough one to pick. Let's see here. Third Saturday in October. I think this game's just going to mean too much to Tennessee to give it to Bama. I think so. Yeah, give me the Vols at home. A lot of home wins. A lot of home wins. So now I feel even better about picking either Alabama or Georgia. This would be a statement game for Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer, though, if they can go into Knoxville, pick up the win. That's a big win. Yeah, I feel good about that. All right, heading into the second or the last week in October, it's pretty significant storylines popping up. Alabama with 2 losses already on the season. Let's see, Georgia still undefeated. Ole Miss picked up their first loss a couple weeks ago at LSU, but they're back in action this week. Tennessee, Texas, Ole Miss still with just the 1 loss. South Carolina and Vanderbilt still looking for their first conference wins. So we'll wrap up the month of October here. I think Alabama beats up on Missouri pretty bad. Probably takes out some vengeance against them after losing to Tennessee. Auburn and Kentucky. Let me circle back to this, see how everything else shapes up. Oklahoma and Ole Miss. I like Oklahoma, but Ole Miss coming off of a bye. That's tough to pass up. Arkansas at Mississippi State. Man, we'll come back to that one. LSU at Texas A&M. A&M would drop to 3-5. That feels pretty bad. That feels pretty bad. But I feel like at this stage in the game, LSU could be humming. Because I guess what's more realistic, Texas A&M going to 3-5 or LSU going to 5-3 before November? Come back to that one because Texas is going to pick up a win in Nashville. So we're back up top. Auburn and Kentucky. These two teams are neck and neck. This is going to be some good football here. So let me take a look here. So this is the last SEC game at home for Kentucky. That's early. Kentucky's just 5-1 over the last 6. Although they haven't met since 2020. Cats don't have a great home field edge. Auburn would be 6-2. Kentucky, yeah, give me Kentucky here. I think the Wildcats bounce back. Arkansas, Mississippi State. I mean, last year was that lovely 7-3 game, so love that for them. It was one of their only few road games for Arkansas. I think I'm going to give this one to Arkansas. I mean, we're talking about a coach coaching for his job. Jeff Lebby's still trying to get things figured out. I think now once they start to turn that November corner, they'll start to hitch up a little bit. LSU and Texas A&M. Give me LSU on the road. I don't feel great about it, but that's where we're at. I like LSU a lot better than Texas A&M. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Musmeyer, I think that's how you say his name. That's gonna be, and like if I'm gonna ding Texas A&M early in the season for quarterback injury trouble, that's not gonna get any better. And the way that LSU is gonna be able to run the football, I think that they'll be in much better shape. I'm feeling better. Now that we are in November, let's evaluate things. For Alabama, 5-2 feels yucky, but first year head coach, that's playing the schedule that they do. Georgia's still undefeated at 7-0. That's not much of a shocker. Feels pretty chalk. LSU at 5-2 feels. Wait, did I update them? Because LSU won. Okay, LSU actually at 6-3, 6-2. Missouri at 6-2. Ole Miss still 7-1. Tennessee just with one loss. Texas with one loss. And then South Carolina and Vanderbilt still without a conference win. So as we go to week 10, let's take a look here. Maine and Oklahoma. Oklahoma needs a win. I think they figure it out there. Georgia on the road against Florida. I don't think Georgia has much issue there. Mississippi State picks up a win against UMass. So maybe Mississippi State fans will be nicer to me this year. Ole Miss and Arkansas. I love what Pittman's doing this year, but the Kiffin train rolls on. If I'm going to sell you on Arkansas here, it's going to be because Ole Miss is looking ahead at a matchup against Georgia next week. So watch out. I'm not going to be bold enough to pick it, but keep an eye out for that. If Arkansas is able to win, that's probably a contributing factor. Auburn over Vanderbilt's not very controversial. Oh boy, two disappointing teams. South Carolina hosting Texas A&M. In South Carolina. I think maybe this is the point where Elko starting to get some stuff going against South Carolina. I mean, they're not. Hmm. Because like if South Carolina loses this game, then it's kind of the downfall of Shane Beamer. Do I think it's going to be the downfall of Shane Beamer? I think they're going to be much improved. Oh man. I think I gotta give it to South Carolina. Yeah, let's go. Boy, I'm really dogging on Texas A&M, which feels bad. Feels bad. Kentucky and Tennessee can give me take a look at Tennessee here real quick, because I think feels like things are going a little bit too well for Tennessee. I mean, they're coming off of a bye. They just picked up a win against Alabama. They're at home against Kentucky. They're at home the next two games. Boy, this is a favorable schedule for Tennessee looking at it. I mean, if you avoid the pickup at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, after that it lightens up a bit. You get Florida and Alabama both at home, Kentucky, Mississippi State at home. That's 4 weeks, 4 consecutive games at home. That's favorable. Yeah, yeah. Give me Tennessee here. Um, where does that leave Kentucky? I mean, Kentucky's still in pretty good shape. Kentucky's still on par where I think they'll be. Week 11, second game in November. Starting to hit the final stretch now. So as we're looking at the standings here, Georgia's cruising ahead at the number one spot. Shocker, shocker. Ole Miss has 4 wins. Texas, I feel like they have 4 wins. Maybe I just didn't calculate that correctly. But Texas with just one loss so far, that being to Georgia. Um, yeah, unclear. Unclear. But we'll calculate that all out here once we get towards the end so we can see where the standings are. But Ole Miss is right up there. Texas and Tennessee each with just one loss on the season. So, like I said, a second SEC title spot up for grabs. Florida and Texas. Texas at home. Alabama and LSU. Alabama coming off of a bye. First Saturday in November. We'll circle back to this. I do think, boy, how big of a game would this be for Ole Miss to pick up a win against Georgia? I mean, to this point, Georgia's been tested pretty well. They played Alabama, they played Texas. Um, I'm gonna say I think they lose one of those 3 games, and I think it's probably here at Ole Miss. Um, I think Jackson Dart legacy game. I think it's gonna mean more. I think it's gonna mean more to Ole Miss than it is to Georgia. So I think the first time since I started doing these ratings, here's that predicted loss for Georgia. I think Tennessee picks up a win against Mississippi State. Man, I'm really high on Tennessee. I didn't think I'd be this high on them. But I mean, that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles. I think South Carolina picks up a win here against Vanderbilt. I mean, Alabama's still Alabama, but the Bayou still the Bayou. Do I really predict Alabama to get 3 losses? I mean, what's more realistic? LSU getting 3 losses, or yeah, yep. I think Alabama. And I mean, the thing with these high end teams that once they really kind of focus in, this feels like a game where like they could make up for a lot of work. And I still don't really trust Brian Kelly, so I think he picks that up. Oklahoma, Missouri, former Big 12 matchup. That's a tough one. I don't think Missouri's necessarily a great home field advantage. But again, you're playing with a freshman quarterback. Give me the home team. When in doubt, go with the home team, I suppose. Missouri gives Oklahoma their 4th loss of the year, so they dropped to 6-4. Missouri keeps humming at 7-2. So good on them. Good week for Missouri. 3 games left in the season now, and now we have our first huge, real shakeup with Ole Miss taking down Georgia. So let's take a look. So I have 5 wins still. We have Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. So they're tied for first place. Although Ole Miss has the head-to-head against Georgia, and I don't think Tennessee's played either of those teams. No, they'll play Georgia this week, so that'll knock one of those two teams down a peg. But those are kind of the 3 teams at the top. Outside of that, we have Texas, who still just has the one conference loss to Georgia. We have Alabama with 2 losses. Now, if Georgia picks up another loss or Ole Miss, I mean, there's opportunity for them to slip back in. Other than that, those are really our contenders in the SEC at this point. 14 race. I didn't expect really Tennessee to be a factor in this. I guess without further ado, let's just kind of knock them down a peg because I think Georgia, especially coming off a loss, they mean business. So I don't think they're going to give that up. I really like this rivalry game for Arkansas if they're going to pick up a win that they're not supposed to. And I mean, this game could single-handedly save Sam Pittman's job, but I don't think they have the horsepower to keep up with Texas. I think up a win against Louisiana Monroe. Now, granted, the same spot where they lost to New Mexico State last year, so watch out for them. Kentucky beats Murray State, Alabama, Mercer, Texas A&M. All the starting to get their non-conference schedules wrapped up. LSU and Florida. LSU, I think, picks up this win. I think they're way more. I think both of these teams are very desperate at this point because Florida, where are they at? So they are at 4 wins. So they got to pick up 2 wins over the next 3 games, and they play. So they got LSU, they got Ole Miss, and they got Florida State to wrap up the season. So they know they have to win this game at home, but they don't. But they don't. Missouri and South Carolina. I think I still like Missouri. Oh boy, but this feels like a sneaky game for South Carolina to come up and steal. Let's see here what the rest of South Carolina's schedule is looking like. They got Missouri this week, and then Wofford and Clemson. So they got to win 2 out of those 3. Hold on, hold on. So do they got to get to 7? Because Wofford and Old Dominion. Let me just look this up here real quick. Let me do a couple of fact checks. Because Ole Miss, because both of those teams are FCS, they'll have to get to 7 wins to make a bowl game because you can only count 1 per year. Okay, I'm gonna have to check on Wolford because I know Old Dominion is FBS. So their magic number 6. Um, this feels like a sloppy game for Missouri to kind of overlook. Let's see where the rest of Missouri's schedule has them at. So let's see here. They play South Carolina at Mississippi State, at Arkansas, or no, Arkansas at home. So I think they dropped one of those games, especially coming off that big win against Oklahoma. Missouri's 5-0 in this series. Because I think I'm gonna have them losing at least one more game here over the next couple of weeks. South Carolina might come out more desperate, knowing that they need this game for a bowl game. I'm gonna say they pull off the upset. I'll say they pull off the upset here. Let's see. So did we get them all? We did. So I mean, kind of big notes here. Georgia bounces back, beats up on Tennessee, knocks them down to I was kind of shaping as that second tier outsiders looking in the SEC race, and then Georgia clips, or excuse me, South Carolina clips Missouri. Final 2 weeks of the season now. Now we're starting to get a picture on how this conference championship's gonna shape up. So Georgia still with just the 1 loss in conference play. Let's see here. Ole Miss also has 1 loss, and they have the head-to-head against Georgia. So I'd assume they're sitting at that top seed, and then Georgia and Texas are the only other 2 teams with just 1 conference loss. And now that Georgia has that head-to-head over Texas, I think that puts them in with a rematch with Ole Miss. But let's see how the rest of the season shapes up. Ole Miss and Florida. I think by this point, the writing's already on the wall for Florida. Georgia picks up a cake win against UMass. Tennessee bounces back, picks up a win. South Carolina picks up a win against Wofford. Arkansas gets back to bowl eligibility, right? Yes, they get their sixth win of the season. Texas A&M and Auburn. Auburn's at 7-3. That's a tough beat to go on the road. I think Texas A&M is going to be playing pretty good by this, but that puts them at 7 losses. That feels cruel. And now we're looking at a game where Auburn might be peeking ahead to Alabama. How did this game go last year? Did they play at the same time last year? Texas A&M and Auburn. Texas A&M beat up on Auburn pretty bad. I mean, they were at home, so that helps. They're 9-point favorites. Covered that spread, won by 17. But Auburn, this is the game that they lost to New Mexico State. Is that right? Is that right? Yeah, last year they blew out Arkansas and then got blown out by New Mexico State, and then came back and played Alabama really well as 13-point dogs. Only lost by 3. So this is a vulnerable spot. It feels kind of silly for that to happen again in back-to-back seasons. LSU picks up a win over Vanderbilt. I think Missouri bounces back, picks up a win against Mississippi State. Alabama, watch out. Watch out. I mean, I'm picking Alabama, but watch out, Oklahoma. Looking for their 7th win of the season. Watch out. And I think Texas takes care of business against Kentucky as we head to the final week of the SEC season. So here's where we're at going into the final week of the season right now. So 3 teams with 6 conference wins: Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas. Um, and it's kind of a interesting spot because I think Ole Miss will get the nod over Georgia because they beat them head to head, and then Georgia beat Texas so head to head. So I think right now, as it sits, Georgia and Ole Miss are in the SEC championship game. Um, that looks right. That looks right. Um, LSU, Alabama are out of the contention at this point. Tennessee could still, in theory, get to that 6-2 record, but they would need some funky stuff to happen. So it seems like a real race between them. Texas A&M at 4-7 right now feels very disappointing. Vanderbilt at 3-8 sounds about right. They're the only team without a conference loss. Mississippi State with a conference win. Texas A&M, which just won as well. That's a tough slate for Texas A&M. Are we sure that we like that? I mean, just looking at their schedule, there's, I mean, just kind of the same thought process for Mississippi State last year. You have your winnable games on the road. Where like, do I think that they could beat Auburn? Yeah, I think they could. But going to Jordan Hare feels tough. At South Carolina, that's a tough one. South Carolina coming off a bye. You have LSU at home, so that feels kind of like a waste game. I don't think they're going to beat LSU. They go to Mississippi State. Again, a winnable game. You know, I probably like Texas A&M a little bit more than I like Mississippi State, but in Starksville's not easy. They haven't proven that they've been able to keep any quarterbacks healthy. So yeah, I mean that's a bummer. I think things are going to look up for Mike Elko, but that's a tough way to start. But other than that, I didn't expect Tennessee to have such a good season. They're at 9-2. Texas at 10-1. I figured that they might fall off a little bit here. So let's get after it here. Mississippi State and Ole Miss. I really like Ole Miss here. I mean that's Georgia and Georgia Tech. I think Georgia takes care of business. I like Alabama slightly. Whoops. All right, Florida and Florida State. I like Florida State. So I mean, so where does that put Florida? That puts them at 4-8. Probably a little bit too harsh on Florida, but it is what it is. Louisville and Kentucky. Ooh, that's a good one. We'll come back to that one. Oklahoma and LSU. Oklahoma at 6-5. Boy, in tough road for Oklahoma. I think they'll. I'm hoping Jackson Arnold's playing good ball at this point. They pick up the win. I think Missouri picks up the win against Arkansas. I like Clemson over South Carolina. I like Texas over Texas A&M. Actually, let's sit on that for a little bit. I think Tennessee's going to roll through Vanderbilt, win the Tennessee State Championship. Let's see here, Louisville. What do I know about Louisville? Not a whole lot of good things. I know they're losing their quarterback. I like Jeff Brom. For the Governor's Cup, I think Kentucky. I like Kentucky, especially at home. Um, and now could this be the spot where Texas slips up? Could this be the spot? Because I mean, if you're Texas A&M, this game means so much more to Texas A&M than it does Texas. Because I mean, Texas is still playing for a spot at the SEC title game. I guess they don't know that Georgia loses to Georgia Tech, or Georgia beats Georgia Tech, so they're out. Um, or I guess they do, because those games are on Friday. So yeah, they know exactly where they're at. So now they're even more dejected. Yeah, give me Texas A&M. Boy, I'm actually feeling really good about that. Feeling really good about that. Now that Texas knows that they're not going to be in the SEC title game, they know that they're going to make the playoff. This could be that first instance where it's like, do they really care about this game? I don't know. But Texas A&M really cares about Texas. So at home, yeah, yeah, I think so. I think so. I like this. I like this. So after week 14, after Thanksgiving, we have a very clear picture of how the SEC finishes. Georgia and Ole Miss going back to the SEC championship game, which works out pretty well because I'm not 100% sure how they're doing the SEC championship game this year. I think they're doing just the top two teams, but I still see like divisions listed on their thing, so I don't know if they're still sticking with divisions. But they'll rematch. I think Georgia probably takes them to the cleaners again. I think it's real tough to beat that Georgia team two times in the same season. So good luck, Ole Miss. Tennessee, Texas, Alabama also get back to double digit wins. Um, let's see here: Auburn, LSU, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Oklahoma all bowl teams. South Carolina just misses. Texas A&M just misses, but Texas A&M picks up that win against Texas to really solidify things. Vanderbilt once again goes home with no SEC wins. Um, there was going to be a spot for Vanderbilt to win, which I don't feel good about any of them. They get Tennessee at home. I mean, Tennessee's kind of out of the SEC race, but also Tennessee probably needs this game to lock a spot in the playoff. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing any winnable games. And they got Virginia Tech to start off the season, so I don't think they win that game. So 3 wins feels as generous as they can get. I think they beat Alcorn State, Georgia State, and Ball State. But that'll do it for this preview here. So we'll do a separate video once all the Power Four series are wrapped up. So that way we can kind of go over conference championships, how those will play out, and then we'll also kind of unravel the playoff as a postseason preview. But again, thank you for sticking with us. What a great video! What a great time! College football is here.